Check. 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't know you played guitar.
I just kind of just have guitars.
Okay.
I do. Like I do.
I do play, but I used to play in a band last
Talk again.
year. Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty rainy day outside. I was really looking forward to some nice spring, slushy, sunny laps, but we have to wait a little bit longer, it seems.
Okay, I think that sounds good.
Awesome.
Same volume as me. Cool. So I like to leave the headphones on just because I can hear it. But you, like I said, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't bother me. Some people don't like them. You don't have to.
Less things to worry about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, cool. Well, Craig Barker, thanks for coming on my show.
Thanks, Ryan.
Good to see you, man.
Having me.
Yeah, thanks. It's been good. It's good to see you. I'm glad I bumped into you. Was it like a week ago or something?
Yeah, it was at the 72-hour film festival.
Yeah. So just
Which you won.
Yeah, so we won. Yeah, we can get into that in a second. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome, yeah.
So I'll do a quick intro here. I just kind of jumped into it. It's kind of how I operate. I just kind of get going here.
Absolutely.
But so you're Whistler based. You've been around here for a long time. We'll just get this out of the way fast so we can start talking. You're a photographer. Photographer first. Do you do anything else? Anything else on the side? Like do?
I had a background in marketing,
Okay.
and then kind of like pivoted to photography probably like 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, cool. That's a bit closer.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, because I met you kind of through the cannabis space, I think, for the most part. Ski a bit. I can't remember. It was like during I think it was during Intersection maybe or something.
Yeah, I believe it was probably a bit of a mix of both. Like, I think I first saw you professionally or came across you professionally when you worked with Broken Coast.
Yeah, right. That was cannabis place I worked for a while.
Yeah,
right,
because you were marketing with those guys.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was kind of when I was starting to get more seriously into the space. So I think I was looking for inspiration and people, doing well, new clients.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's an interesting space. Okay, yeah. So you're a photographer first and foremost, and you live in Whistler. You've been here for like, when did you move here?
I've been in Whistler full time for about 7 years,
Right.
Canada 11 years,
Okay.
and I lived in Vancouver for about 2.5, 3 years.
Okay.
I lived in a van for a year-ish whilst I was
Nice.
starting my business
Sweet.
Standard.
Cool. Yeah,
it's
sweet.
The
Van life.
rite of passage to live here and work here.
Yeah, that's dope.
And then, kind of settled in Whistler finally.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah. So the cannabis space, I did that for like 3 years. And we don't have to get too deep into like businesses and that kind of stuff, but you were there just at the beginning of it. At the beginning of legalization, you were in part of it. And I see that you work with quite a few brands, like a handful of brands, I guess, on a regular basis. And I haven't been in it now since 2020 was the company I worked for laid a bunch of people off. They were dicks about it too. And but do you think it's that do you think that cannabis space is like I hate saying space. It seems weird, right?
Industry?
Yeah, the cannabis world. Has it changed a bit? Like, has it changed? Like, we were talking about it coming up the stairs here. And I know, like, the regulations are different. Has it changed a lot in the last little while? I mean, are you still pretty close to it? But
It's constantly changing, and it changes fairly quickly, too. Just give you a brief history. I mean, the cannabis industry has been running for a long, long, long time.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Like, the legalization in Canada happened in 2018.
Yeah, for sure.
Officially.
Yeah.
I was in photography. I got into photography through events mainly, and I had a great mentor in Vancouver. I'm still extremely good friends with.
Yeah.
I started doing travel photography, kind of lifestyle photography. I didn't know where to put my attention and my effort.
Right.
And I'm a big ski and snowboard fan too. Obviously, big skier. That's why I moved to Canada.
Yeah.
Ski photography was a avenue I was trying to pursue and kind of guess in the wider spectrum of that sort of outdoor industry.
Right.
But I realized pretty quickly, not for lack of trying, that it was going to be a very competitive industry to break into.
Especially here in Whistler, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, you've had amazing local photographers on your podcast, Berger, Fatal, all those guys.
Yeah.
But there's some big hitters around here, like Morrison, Jorgensen, like all those guys.
And they were ingrained. They've been in this. They were like pretty much like the beginning of it all. I mean, I remember when I first met those guys probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And photography was so different, obviously, back then. I mean, digital was just coming out, and they were already ingrained. So it's kind of like, I feel like I work in TV right now too. And I feel like the same thing is like once people are in the door, if they don't leave, no one else really gets in.
Yeah. So to bring it back to the cannabis, that's when I looked at these folks and I was like, okay, they're amazing photographers,
Sure.
and they've got got amazing skill sets. But
Yeah.
one of their competitive advantages was they're here, relatively early in the scene.
Yeah, right, of course, yeah.
And exactly what you said. And I was like, well, I know legalization's approaching.
Yeah.
Like in 2017, I was like, we know it's going to be happening. Like it wasn't a secret.
Yeah.
What it looked like, no one knew, but
Yeah.
like it was happening. Medical was already legal for a long, long time. Canada's been a good leader in that.
Yeah.
So I was chilling by the lake one day. I was smoking a joint, and genuinely, I was like, looked down at my joint, and I was like, here's the opportunity.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like this is the next big thing.
Yeah.
And I started working for black market companies in Vancouver, doing like just bud shots for their menus for online, out in my van with long exposure.
A little studio you set up in the back of your van.
On my bed.
Yes.
Like I wish I had a photo of it. I probably do somewhere, but it's so janky.
That's
I used
cool.
to do it in the Safeway car park in Kits.
Really? Eh?
Yeah.
Well, I guess because if you're doing a menu for like a black market shop, they just need a photo of the bud, and there's no precedent set before that to what it's supposed to look like. You just need the bud.
Yeah, and I thought I was doing pretty good, but like I recently looked back at some of those photos and they're pretty bad. At least the white was white. That's still something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, right.
But like I figured out how to get the white background white, which wasn't easy considering there was no separation. I was just using light coming in from the windows in a light box. So
that's pretty funny. You shot in the back of a van. That's pretty awesome, though.
I had no money and didn't have a home.
Right.
Like I was living in my truck, and I saw this opportunity. And part of the reason I was living in my truck was so that I could move around to these different clients and collect product or go. I was still shooting a lot of skateboarding at this point too.
Oh, you're shooting skateboarding? Okay,
like
cool.
Downhill skateboarding, I should say.
Yeah, cool, sweet, nice.
First love.
Did you ever do they have a longboard festival here? They used to have a longboard festival here.
I did. I shot the last year of it.
They don't do that anymore. Yeah,
I know why. Because it costs $10,000 a day to rent that hill, and longboarders. I love them to bits, but it's worse than the flat land.
Wait a second. $10,000 a day to rent that hill from the Muni or from Whistler Blackcomb?
Good question. It's on the bobsled hill. It's the bobsled access. Right. So I'm guessing it's Whistler Blackcomb.
$10,000 a day,
and they're not even. It was like
what?
It was like not even bobsleigh season. I don't know when bobsleigh season is, but they weren't bloody using it.
Yeah, it's wintertime. And that's a lot of money.
I know. I know. It's like these kids just wanted to race down the hill.
I guess
it was cool, and there was lots of longboard events. I went to quite a bunch of them, and that's where I honed a lot of my sports photography.
Right, like faster shutter speeds and just like following in slow. That right? Yeah, I guess that's those. I've watched a lot of. In the time that I've been in this industry, I've watched a lot of filmmakers and photographers start in skiing and snowboarding with their buddies and hang out, and then they hone their skill, and then the money over the years. When I first started working in this industry, the money was just booming in. People were just pumping out money, right? They were paying a lot of money for people, and then it started to slowly kind of go away. But you don't really have anybody. You have some mentors and stuff teaching you, but you learn a lot about what it's like to shoot in you don't have a lot of time. There's you have to get the one shot, so you can't just dick around and sit in the studio and shoot. So you do hone your skills pretty fast, or you hope you do. And then when the money dries up, a lot of people, like you said, you went to Cannabis. But some people I know in the film industry have gone now to do films and television and stuff because they learned so much in skiing and snowboarding filming, and that money kind of went away. And they were like, "Oh, now we know what we're doing." Mm-hmm. I wonder how many people actually had the vision to do that, or they just people I think just kind of jumped into it, had fun doing it, and ended up being a career for them. Yeah,
I think most creators kind of understand that you're got to create the opportunities to some extent. So if they're not occurring for you in the desired industry or where you want to be locally, you've got to kind of hustle a little bit and try and maybe make concessions, maybe figure out a new vision of how you can put your skills to use. Right. I need to speak to him because I haven't spoken to him in a while, but someone like Jeremy Allen I really respect, who's a local guy who is an amazing sports photographer. He is a very personable and well-loved guy in the corridor. He gets along with everybody.
He's a lovely human. Yeah, he's
such a nice dude. And I've noticed him doing more sort of camera work. Maybe more on the line what you kind of do sometimes. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
But I was cool. I was awesome to see someone who had a lot of skill, a lot of passion, and wanted to be more involved in these bigger brands, these big projects. And the way that he figured out to do it was to be a camera operator, rather than trying the freelancing. Because I'm not gonna lie, man, the freelance it's tough
a slog.
going.
Yeah, for sure.
it's got its ups and downs, and luckily there's more ups and downs at the moment. But I'm under no illusion that it could all end like fairly fast.
I think it does end pretty fast, especially in the action sports, because everybody's younger and coming up, right? So, and I think a lot of times people like create their career through the crew they're with.
Very much so.
And so as like your friends are skiers who are young or older, and they get older, and you have to either meet the new kids coming up, but they've already got a photographer buddy theirs, because everyone's so influenced over the past 20 years. People do pick up a camera. Someone like Jeremy, I met him on a film set. We were filming this show called Ultimate Ninja Challenge. And that show sucked. And it was for Discovery Channel, right? And it was the dude who created Naked and Afraid, that TV show. Yeah. So the guy who created that pitched the show. It doesn't matter what I say, I guess, but he pitched a show called Ultimate Ninja Challenge. It was going to be called something else. And it was basically like a they brought a bunch of people in. There was like a survival show, and it was like these, I guess back in the day, ninjas were like survivalists and kind of like offcasts from society type thing, and they were like, so they had to be like survivalists and whatever else, and live in the bushes and like sneak around and shit, right? So this is like what the show was about. But anyway, I met Jeremy on the show, and he was just this kid who just was so friendly, like the funniest, like super funny kid, friendly. And there was a bunch of kids in that group that he hung out with, and I know like Justin Bruins, you know him?
No, I can't say it.
So now he's like filming for the Sherpas and stuff. He was there.
Oh, wow.
His mom got him, like, he was a camera assist, and like they were trying to get me to camera assist. I'm like, I don't know anything about cameras. He's like, I'll do it. He kind of knew a bit, but you just jump in. And TV's weird because sometimes I don't think anyone knows what they're doing when they first start. I'll do it, and then you just learn. And like, I think a lot of people for TV are kind of outcasts in a way. They're not outcasts, but they're kind of like, they don't know what they want to do, but they want to do something fun. They just jump in. So it's cool. I mean, I didn't know Jeremy was doing that, but it's definitely what I was saying before is like, you just jump in and do it. And I think after being a camera operator, there's a dude that used to run Sweetgrass. You know Sweetgrass Films? They used to make, yeah. So I was working on an IMAX movie, and the dude, I can't remember his name, shows up, and he's the DOP.
Cool.
And he came from like working on like Sweetgrass, like making like ski and sober movies out of, I don't know, Rebel Star, I don't know where he's from, but yeah. So there's that avenue is like, it's a surprise when you see it. I know a lot of guys that have done that, and girls too. Yeah.
I think you've got to adapt, and I totally agree that as you're you start off with the crew, and you kind of like you like for me it was the Los Amigos.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and I was like way older than these guys.
Right.
Like I'm 34 now.
Yeah,
like
right.
I don't know how I managed to do it. Like I don't. Like, right. I kind of ran into Dylan and Axel one day and started shooting with them, and I think honestly, like, I don't try to be someone I'm not in that respect. I'm just like, look, I'm here to shoot. I'm here to like do my best. Like you guys do your thing. Like I learned a lot on the job type of thing. But like, everyone's making up as they go along in that respect. And like no one also, there's not much pressure. And I'm the person who puts the most pressure on myself. Sure. Not these guys were never like, oh, like we were disappointed with the shots. It's like the shots are always pretty decent because they're good riders. But long story short, they've all graduated and moved on to their careers.
Because they were like UBC when I met them. They were doing the intersection, and you're part of that.
A small part of that.
Yeah, but you were like involved in it a bit, and they were just like university kids. Yeah. Just now they ski, but they just have their career. That's cool. Yeah, and after that, then I kind of branched out a little bit. I had like connections with some local athletes, but I'm a kind of introverted on more side. It's kind of it's a big effort to go and like reach out to like people I barely know, or like I'm fairly good at networking, but it's still a lot of to go out with someone to shoot skiing. It's there's a lot of dynamics involved, and it's you can't just be like, hey, like I'm just gonna go. Like Mark Abner was someone I've always wanted to shoot with, and I had you shot with him though, I think, right? I think I saw photos of you.
I shot with him last season in that amazing storm cycle that hit like Pemberton, that valley. Yes, and like those shots to me are always going to be really special. But like that's an example of just like kind of one person I was like I always wanted to shoot with them, but now like with the Los Amigos guys have all moved out, they're moved mostly down in Vancouver. Like it's just you need so much what's the word I'm looking for here, you need to keep up momentum with ski photography. Like you need to have people that you can always go out with, like and people who are hungry to do it. And the cycle that I kind of witnessed was, yeah, like people, they're local kids or they're semi-pro athletes that want to get sponsored who are riding super hard, and then something else happens and they move on, which is absolutely fair. I don't think
for sure.
being a pro skier is like a pretty small minority of people. But that being said, I did then get the opportunity to work with like Jeff Thomas.
Dope. Yeah, that guy, man. That guy.
So that was
like
also
a legend.
yeah, I mean, Jeff Thomas is one of my heroes.
Yeah, for sure.
For many
He's
reasons.
awesome. I want to get him on the show.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, I'll touch him.
He's he worked Switchback Entertainment.
Yeah.
And I think maybe MSP.
I don't know. He had his own company called Theory 3 for a while.
Yeah.
Way back in the day. He
Yeah.
was filming his own stuff. Then he went to Poor Boys.
Poor Boys. Sorry, that was it, not MSP.
Poor Boys scooped up because he had like guys like Charlie Agger and a bunch of guys who were like all these guys that were shredders. And somewhere along the way, I don't know the exact thing, but somewhere along the way, yeah, he absorbed into Poor Boys. And then he worked, Switchback with Mike Douglas.
Yeah.
And then he went to Origin Design for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy's had a cool career, and now he's back in skiing snowboard again.
Yeah,
Skiing again,
like he does a lot of work for companies like Head.
Yeah.
Like he's one of his main clients.
Yeah.
But he,
That guy's awesome.
yeah, I mean, this dude just like gets the commercial aspect of content creation in the outdoor world.
Yeah.
And trust, they're not an easy match. Like,
No.
It's not like you're going into a studio shoot and you know what your day is going to cost and your models are going to cost and everything costs. It's like, he's been doing it for a long enough time, so he probably has a rough idea.
Sure.
But like, I think they did like a 9-day trip to Mount Baker this year or something. Because I think they went for a weekend and then it just kept snowing and snowing and snowing. And you're like, well, how do you plan for that kind of budget and blah, blah, blah. So not only that, from the business side and creative side, this dude he's so good uphill. He'll beat me on the uphill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I thought
he's just an absolute savage.
That's good. Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I worked with him a few times. But it's like, I think a lot of these things too, we used to have like, I used to not work with MSP, but when they'd come to town, I'd work with them to help them do some stuff in town and stuff. And I think a lot of the money left because you'd go to a place and you have to wait for weather because you're all helicopter stuff, right? So you'd wait and you'd spend like $20,000 just hanging out. And then you'd maybe get one day. So that movie you're making, you just burn 9 days sitting there doing nothing. Where I think these smaller crews, you can go, I think a lot of now, especially now with like a lot of the emphasis on like ski touring and stuff, you kind of, people expect it to be more like you're on the ground more, a little bit slower. But yeah, if you can have the flexibility, I guess people trust them though too. If you have trust and if your clients trust you, you can go and sit somewhere forever and get it done, right? I mean, you have a track record of proving yourself, so.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is knowing the right days to go out. Like he's just, and people like him are just, they're weather watchers.
Yeah.
They're just, and especially if you know the local area. Yeah. I went out with him on a backcountry day, and turning up at the trailhead, it was raining and grey and overcast, and I was like, Jesus, this is going to be a long, shitty day. And then it was kind of grey until 11 o'clock came, sun came out. Yeah. I was like, Jesus Christ. And I was like, we're getting bangers. Like,
yeah, that's sweet. It's like, I think too, living in this town in the Pacific Northwest, the weather's usually pretty shit. So you know to work with it, right? Like if you're working in Colorado, you're working in like, I don't know where else, maybe like, more like interior stuff. You kind of get better days or like longer stretches, I think, right? Or better snow. But in the Northwest, it's like you're dealing with pouring rain in the valley a lot of the times, but it's just nuking up top. And like, I think that's like, there's a style to filming in this area. There's a style to filming in East Coast stuff. There's some of these styles of like kind of developing. I think this is why we get people that, like I said before, you get people that are good at their craft because they have to deal with the shit. They have to deal with like either shitty athletes who get mad because they didn't get the shot they wanted and they're yelling at you because you didn't get the shot you wanted. I'm sure you've dealt with that before. I've seen it a few times. Or like, just like, it was like, it's the weather's too shitty or we got to wait. Like you just learn to deal with the adversity and it makes you better at your craft, how to use your camera better, what settings to use and stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's like, and that's how some of these guys make it in the film industry because everything in the film industry is pretty well like structured. We're shooting this today. We're going to control the light. We're going to control that stuff. And I think maybe that's one of the toughest things for these guys is like learning about like what the studio aspect is like. But otherwise, working your camera with like little support.
It's the chaos order paradigm.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of the old chaos order thing. Yeah. And it applies directly to ski photography and any photography, I think, because and Berger talked about this a little bit on the podcast too. Like, he doesn't go out with, necessarily shots in mind, or
Right.
it's an unfolding process.
Right.
Whereas if you're going for a client shoot in a studio day, it's like, I know exactly what I'm shooting.
Right.
Like you have to, because like the client has expected results
Yeah.
and deliverables. So
Right.
it's this like very, very different style. But I'm so grateful that I learned and honed a lot of my skills with ski photography, because it's just a way to explore, and a way you got to keep flow.
Right.
Because keeping flow when you're out in the mountain with 2 or 3 athletes, variable weather conditions, takes a good amount of like communication skills.
Sure,
and
yeah.
just working a team.
Yeah.
So that served me extremely well in my commercial work I do now.
Yeah, right.
Because sometimes we go bigger shoots, I'm running a team, like I'm
Yeah.
directing or doing shooting and directing.
That's cool.
So in these environments in the cannabis industry, a lot of the time are that they're less variable than, let's say, a mountaintop,
Sure,
but
yeah, of
they're
course.
still variable.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you've not shot in that facility before.
Yeah.
Like, obviously we ask all the right questions ahead of time, but you might not be able to. I ran into this problem the other day. You can't turn some lights off.
Dude, I shot, like I said, I worked before, and then the lighting in there, it was sucks for shooting.
Oh, the lighting's so that's like,
Yeah.
that doesn't faze me, man,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like I've shot in the worst
Yeah.
conditions
I know.
possible.
So exactly, you can that's what I was saying earlier, like that you can relate. You can, like, those skills have like impacted your career in cannabis, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm a better shooter in the cannabis
The
because
lighting in the cannabis industry is so funny because, like, and then you can't take the plant out because there's all these rules and regulations about how you do things, and you can do them. People just go and do it, right? But I was at a shoot. I hired a photographer. I hired Chris McCann to shoot some stuff a couple times, and then we had an agency who did some stuff, and they brought their own photographers and stuff. But I mean, you try to take it out of the facility to shoot it. So you just got to clip a plant. You want to bring the plant out, but there's so many hurdles and stuff you're supposed to jump to get it out there, and you're like, well, I might as well just shoot in the fucking grow room while it's shitty lighting and stuff to get it over with.
yeah.
But like, it's tough.
Well, I figured out that I was never gonna like get studio quality shots in the grow room. Just simple as that.
Can, yeah, for sure.
Just because there's a million things going on.
Yeah.
You've got the lighting, which you touched on. You got fans going. You got D-hums going.
Mhm.
It's a cramped environment. It's hot.
Yeah.
There's people working.
Yeah.
The plants are moving all over the shop. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a conducive environment to shoot
Yeah.
any, I would say, studio quality work.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, man, we ended up creating the pop-up studios like
Yeah.
in the corridor.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
Yeah.
I've done it in a shed before, man.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, professional photographers, like if you're a studio photographer in Toronto and you're like, oh, I shot this in the studio, they'd assume it's like a big white, high ceiling, all this stuff, all
Yeah,
these plugs.
no.
I'm like, dude, like sometimes it's the smallest space, and to try to doing it with a black background because your
Yeah.
light's flying everywhere with white walls. I mean, I'm sure there are like other places that are as difficult to work in, but I mean, it was jumping off in the deep end, and I like that, to be honest, because it not everyone can do it, and you've got to actually figure out some stuff.
It tests your skills and it tests your like resolve to do it. And also, the good thing is there wasn't a lot of people who did it. Before. So like, I'm not saying you didn't have to be the quality, and you clearly have incredible quality, but like, you were allowed to have a learning curve because there was nobody setting the standard before. Like, you
100%.
If the way I look at it is someone like yourself was there even before legalization, and everyone thinks legalization, like everyone was selling weed for like hundreds of years or whatever else, but like you were kind of there at the beginning to shoot stuff, right? Like at the beginning of legalization, when people wanted those beauty shots, when they wanted that certain stuff, and
When there was money.
Yeah, right. Yeah, dude. When there was money, that money went away fast. Eh? That was worse than the ski and snowboard industry.
Oh yeah.
But so I look at it now and I see your work now, and I would always talk about the black background. The white was getting old and stale. And then you try to get like movement stuff. We looked at like trying to hire like 3D artists to do like these programs where the cameras are all around, you shoot stuff, and the innovation. We're like, but we're just shooting buds, and people, the audience just wants to see up close big crystals and all this shit, right? And so trying to innovate was almost. It didn't seem like it was worth it at some point in the cannabis space. And maybe it is now. I've been gone for a little while. But it seemed like at that time, if you're trying to innovate, you're too far ahead of the game. You're just trying to we need to get photos out. And then all the times You couldn't show like a joint smoking. You couldn't even show that because you'd get busted by Health Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's Instagram account is getting shut down. It still happens now.
Mm-hmm.
So all this weight of you spending money, and I think you work with a few good brands who are probably just like, we're doing it, we don't care. Like there's like a few like renegade brands who do great stuff and they shoot stuff. But yeah, it's like a weird that industry. I don't know. It's crazy because you just shooting butts and people want it, but like then it's like this like you can't. There's certain stuff you just can't do, so you're kind of tied to it. So having to work within those boundaries is pretty tough too, I'd imagine. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like excuse me. If you're in marketing, like if you're in a creative marketing or a strategic marketing in the cannabis industry,
It was
props
brutal.
to you because like it's a difficult space to be in.
Yeah, for sure.
Not only have you got like in crazy regulations, you've got immense industry pressure. Like the supply demand is all over the shop. Like part of the reason why the cannabis industry is struggling so much now is because there was just so much demand.
Yeah.
Sorry, so much oversupply at the beginning.
Yeah.
And of poor quality product. Things are stabilizing now,
Yeah.
but the price crunch, like the prices have dropped so
much, dude.
My buddy picked up an ounce for $130 the other day, and it was actually pretty decent.
That would have cost like $350, like at the early part of the cannabis of the
Probably,
legalization,
yeah.
more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the that type of thing is like just you asked, you know, is earlier like what's it like? I mean, it's changing all the time.
Yeah.
From a marketing creative perspective, like firstly, marketing perspective, there's a lot of money being spent on retail right now, which is smart because it's actually contrary to my hypothesis a while back anyway was I thought there was still a lot of sales online, and that's not really the case anymore. Like buying on the BC Cannabis stores, on the OCS,
it's a horrible
through the
experience.
Oh, it's terrible. Mendo places are getting better, like, but you still got to wait a couple of days to get your pack. So, I mean, it's not great, but it's also not that actually any cheaper than just going to the store.
Well, and the store is like now there's more stores opening up.
Yeah.
Before, some places didn't have a store for like, you know, you had to drive 50 kilometers or something to get to a store.
Yeah.
So it made sense to buy it online.
Yeah. So that was a big challenge. So there's a lot of money going to sort of retail marketing, which is why, you know, if you go into not any dispensary, but some dispensaries, you're going to see some of my work there, Kyle's work there, like, because that's point of sale.
Yeah.
And that really does make an impact. Like,
for sure it does.
The regulations, like we can't open cannabis in the store. Like there's no
So
smell,
dumb.
you can't see it. So, and I said this from the get-go, I'm like, if anyone questioned why the budget you should be putting into your photography, it's like, well, that's the only that's the only cue people have to decide on whether it's good. The other thing, it's the name of the strain.
Yeah.
And the brand that you're, you know, the trust in the brand. But like without
the name of the strain, but people just make up strains. They grab a stuff, put like, this is purple OG. Like, no, it's not. It's something else. Or like, I think the company I worked for, they lost a bunch of, not Broken Coast, but I worked for like a bigger company. I think it's Till right now. It was Afria. You'd grow strains and then you just name it. And it would be like, this is a cross of this. And then you'd be like, well, and then you'd name something. And then someone would be like, no, it's not the original. Like when you get a legacy market, these are dumb terms, I guess, old terms, but like get a legacy market, they'll call you on stuff. You're like, no, dude, that's not what that is. I'm the ones who created these seeds in like Montreal, whatever, in the 80s or whatever. And that's not that. Tell us how you got that genetic. And you're like, you can't, because we just made it up.
Yeah, I agree.
So people are like,
it's where legacy is meeting the legal, and it's a gray area, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you're commercializing a whole new product, and people are going about it in their own different ways.
Right.
And like the names, some of the traditional strain names aren't conducive to the modern market. I'll give you a perfect example here. Coast Mountain Cannabis is one of our clients I work closely with. We have a strain called LSD, which is
can't put that.
old school strain. Like it's a beautiful sativa.
Yeah.
We applied, or CMC applied to have that.
They won't let you put it.
No, you can't have it. So we've called it Lucy in the Sky.
Yeah.
Because it's
Which is that's like
to the Beatles, obviously, which is all about.
Which is a crazy workaround, because everyone knows that's what it means anyway. Like everyone knows Lucy in the Sky. If you know LSD, you know that's what Lucy. Like it's so. When I worked for Broken Coast, they'd have these great strains, but before I got there, they named them like after local islands around, so like Quadro and stuff. And it kind of worked for a while, and I kind of thought about it. I thought it was good for a while, but then people didn't know what it was.
I agree.
And they were like, we don't. So they've since gone back to naming it long after I've been gone, but they've since gone back to naming it strains.
I highly encourage that method
Yeah,
because
I think so too.
Because if like and the more educated the consumer gets, they're gonna know like some lineage that they're
Right.
like if you like jet fuel gelato or something because there's a specific taste to it, or like runts is a good example where it's like it's a kind of more of a unique kind of taste and terp profile. So if you've got like a cool cross and you're not gonna like capitalize on that, then you've shot yourself in the foot. Because when you go into the store and someone's asking or talking about you're talking to the bud tender about what kind of strains you've enjoyed in the past and you're using actual strain names, then their job's to then remember about all these LPs, licensed producers that have got all these weird names that, you know, that it makes sense from a marketing perspective, but I don't think it makes sense from a cultural perspective. And like, that's my main gripe with the industry is like, it's shooting itself in the foot in a way because it's a commodity already, but by the fact you're just like renaming stuff and making the genetics that less important, you're just you're devaluing it even more. So here's my prediction. We're going to see two very clear segments of the market in the recreational space, at least. The sort of the big box named by the brands, kind of like what I would generally call mids. Nothing crazy good, nothing crazy bad, because quite frankly you can't sell bad weed anymore. It's just it. The consumers, thank God, we're past that phase. Good job, Canada. Good job, weed industry. Thanks everybody, we appreciate your work. But like buying like top shelf craft small batch cannabis it should be slightly more expensive, and people will pay for that quality if it's communicated in the way. So I think we're going to see like that $130 ounce in that kind of like that mids category. That, you know, you could walk in, you can go to the dispensary, you can say to the bud tender, hey, I'm going away for the weekend with the homies.
I need an ounce.
What you got?
You got like good supply or bingo or something. We'll just give you this, and it's like super cheap.
But then you're like, I've got this thing coming up. I've got, you know, we're doing this dinner or something, and I really want to I want to bring out this, or I want to impress this person, or I want to kind of show someone this, or whatever it is, like, or they might have a specific terp profile they really like, or they've heard about this new strain that they want to try. So it's creating more of a intentional product. You know
it's kind of like, you know, you go to the cigar shop and you go and buy like maybe a pack of like, you know, like mini cigars, but when you want to go real cigar, you go to a humidor and you buy a nice cigar and go with your buddies. What got me when I worked in the industry, and maybe it's changed, and I hope it has, was the people who were just fucking idiots, didn't know what was going on in the industry. They came from like wine, or they came from like tobacco sales. They came from these things, and they were just like, they learned about what it's like to just manipulate a market, manipulate the product, and just sell things that are kind of fibs and lies. And I noticed that impacted like a lot of people's even just motivation to get into the industry, and people just left and stuff. And this, like, that's what totally ruined a lot of good brands, or a lot of like, or brands that have potential, and took that, you know, cheap bag of weed and tried to sell them. People sell a cheap bag of weed for a lot of money because no one cared. The consumer did care, but they didn't have a choice, and you could still buy from the black market. So I think that industry got shit on a bunch from those people, and as they leave, well, that's why it's probably getting better now, because they've been, you know, I mean, even for example, a company I used to work for, the big company, like people that I felt that way about, they're no longer there. And now they've kind of righted the ship and they're changing things around a bit. And I think that's like, I don't really have I don't want to make a bunch of comments on that, but I think the industry, it's like anything. I mean, I don't know a lot about it anymore. I've been out of it for a while, but it has changed in 4 years. It's changed a ton.
It's evolving, and if I had to say, I think it's going for the better.
For sure.
Things are changing for the better. It does mean there's going to be a lot of people who are going to lose out, unfortunately, and it's a free market economy. Like,
what do you think about? Sorry, go ahead.
Like, I'll give you. You were totally right on the fact that like there was huge overvaluations. There was a lot of just people trying to make quick money, and I know, you know, I'm not an economy expert or anything like that, but I'm sure it's not the first time. It won't be the last time. Anytime there's a new industry,
like mushrooms, when they come out.
Yeah, it's probably, I don't think it's going to be the same scale, but I think there will be that same type of thing. Hopefully we've learned a couple of lessons along the way, but I doubt it.
You know what's gonna be crazy to me is people just walking around high on mushrooms more than you used to. Like people who aren't like, I mean, people do it, but I mean, like,
I don't think it's the same as weed, to be honest, man. Like I think it's going to be a much smaller industry. Like the weed industry is going to be, it's $1 trillion business,
Yeah.
and like magic mushrooms and psilocybin.
I think it's more for like, I think it'd be more like a therapy thing. As I think it's gonna be, it is. They're trying to push it for that. Which weed's a medicine, but everyone just wanted to get high.
Yeah,
The whole medical thing. I mean, I get it, but it does do some things. But the whole push for that was to make it legal or something, and people make money. I mean, I've had people tell me that I worked with, and it's like the medical thing was good, but I think for mushrooms, I don't know. I feel like you can't just casually eat mushrooms.
no, like it's your day.
Yeah,
Like you can
it's
smoke.
your day.
To be perfectly honest, like if I smoke a joint, that's pretty much my day done.
Yeah.
Like I won't be as functional for the rest of the day. I can
Yeah.
still enjoy my day and hang around, but like
Yeah.
mushrooms, but like it's a write off. Like I'm not doing mushrooms because it's enjoyable, but it's also like it's an experience. Like
Sure, yeah.
you're into it for that trip.
Like I think microdosing is gonna be popular. It is already. I think that'll be like that small dose where you don't feel it, but people want it to like for like mood boosting and stuff. I think that's like probably going to be a big part of that industry.
that's, I think, probably one of the opportunities that like
Yeah.
the chads and like the corporations will
Yeah,
jump on as
for
sort
sure.
of that this is because there's a lot of lawsuit problems. Like if
jeez.
you're just taking magic mushrooms and doing random stuff because you perceived it to be safe, that's
Yeah.
a significant problem. So
Yeah, I don't know. But I think the weed industry is pretty crazy.
I agree with the medical bit though. Like
Yeah.
one thing, like I think that as new markets open up around the world would be very smart to look at
Yeah.
is this differentiation between the medical and the recreational, because
Right.
at the beginning it was, and don't get me wrong, there still is a very important need for medical cannabis,
For sure,
because there is a certain small population, part of the population which genuinely need it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm not a medical expert, but I've had enough stories and I've worked with enough companies and
Yeah.
I've seen the emails that people send. I've seen the feedback, and it
Yeah.
totally improves people's lives.
And they're kind of getting screwed now. The people are like stopping medical sales, and you can just get it from a shop now.
Yeah. So this is the argument, right?
Yeah.
Because there's that part of it, but also there's this kind of gray middle, which I would go to far as say is probably 80% of the and I'm just that's
Yeah,
just
sure.
just the
Yeah.
Pareto principle.
Yeah.
That
We don't
80%
get fact checked on this podcast.
No, dude, I've got a medical thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've got a medical one. Like I
Right.
got 300 grams a month. I can't
That
remember
you
how
can
much.
grow. That means you can grow it too, right? Tons of it.
You can grow. Anyone can grow 4 plants.
I know, but you can get,
ACMPR is a different thing.
yeah,
like,
but that's pretty easy to get, and you can just someone can say, yeah, you got to smoke 10 grams a day, and you can grow a ton of weed.
oh yeah.
It's like, yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But so the medical programs really it helped a lot of people get into sort of, hold on, I've lost my train of thought. So there's the 20, like a small percentage of people who really need that medical cannabis
Yeah.
because they're treating specific illnesses, whereas a lot of the medical rhetoric's around about insomnia, sleep patterns, all that
Sure.
kind of stuff,
Right.
which don't get me wrong, it's still a condition.
Right.
However, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think a good proportion of the symptoms that are associated with medical cannabis use cannabis probably isn't the best solution
Right.
to it.
Yeah,
And again, that's just my personal opinion,
Yeah, for
because
sure.
having smoked cannabis for 10 years,
Yeah.
for insomnia,
Yeah.
you try stopping cannabis
Yeah,
and trying
right.
to sleep, because
Yeah.
it's pretty tough.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I started smoking when I was 12 years old. I haven't smoked now for like 4 months. I just quit. I didn't quit for good, but I need to just like, I don't think it's a benign substance. Like there's stuff to it for sure. If you do, especially when you're young. But I stopped doing it. And it's I definitely more motivated for sure. And you can just see things change. Sleeping though, I get like crazy dreams stuff. Like I sleep better now that I don't do it, but it took me a long time to be able to fall asleep for sure. Like a month or two before I could like actually fall asleep without having to be like,
Yep.
yeah, because you think about it too, right? Like, oh, I should just go get baked and go to sleep.
Yeah, well, to me, like that's kind of like in that kind of like gray medical area.
Yeah.
It has the potential to create more problems than it's solving
Sure.
in that
Yeah.
respect, because especially around insomnia, because people think, oh, I can smoke weed and I can sleep, and it's like, well, you're not solving the problem. You're just
That's the
dealing
thing
with
about all this stuff too, like mushroom stuff. Like you're still like, I think they want you. I guess I used to say you're still taking a drug, whether it's mushrooms, whatever it is, you're still taking a drug. But it is better than taking like a chemical sleeping pill, like an Ambien or whatever it is to fall asleep. I get that for sure.
Well, our bodies have the endocannabinoid system in it. So we're actually somewhat evolved to take the medicinal, the good benefit properties from cannabis, and there's an actual system in our bodies for it.
What's crazy is the difference between eating it and smoking it. When you eat it, it can just fuck you up. Like if you're not, I have friends who can eat it and nothing happens. And I've heard stories of people that can take a bunch, but the funny thing is that when you eat it and then compared to smoking it, it's so different, eh?
Yeah, I would say so. But that's opened a whole new market too with the edibles, and like I get it it's a tough regulatory thing, to be honest, because it affects everyone differently. Right. And I think that's going to be the toughest thing with psilocybin, is how they're going to regulate it. I don't think it's going to be recreational for a while, and I know maybe that's short-sighted but let's think about cannabis. Cannabis did take a long time to become legal. I know we're on this kind of track now, legalize one thing, it kind of opens the door to the conversation about the other things. BC but a few months ago decriminalized cocaine, and
you can have a gram of each or whatever. You can have up to 3.5 grams on you of different varying things.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole different conversation. But my point is that we seem to be sort of in this revolution of like, okay, let's try and see like
you can get ketamine nasal sprays in California.
Wow.
You can get it for like depression and stuff. And I'm like, you want her on ketamine? And they do the treatments, but they do this ketamine nasal spray, and then there's Bill Ottman. He's like this like a psilocybin or a psychedelic proponent, I guess I call it. Yeah, and like he's like a doctor, and he does a lot of research, and he's like he's talking about the MDMA like trials of like depression, that kind of stuff. And he's like, but we still talk about there's still the come down effect, and they can't stop that. But they're trying to find new chemical ways to create MDMA without having these chemical come downs. They're working on ketamine as well too, but I can't, like, some of these things. I mean, whatever, I've done them all, I guess. But like a ketamine nasal spray to me, that to me is like, if that's something that's available now in California, I don't even know what it'd be. I don't know why you'd like. How can you let somebody go out and spray ketamine in their nose and then get in their car and drive?
Yeah, then it opens up a whole new territory of challenges.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's definitely. I mean, there's potential medical benefits to a lot of these, and we're just only starting to understand.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware at this particular juncture, it's probably better that it's done in a clinical setting. Like I think even with like psilocybin is a good example, because again, it's been a chemical, or it's been used through millennia by tons of different cultures, and everyone's got their own rituals around it. And I mean, I enjoy mushrooms too.
Yeah, for sure.
But like, it's not like I do them. I do them about once every 2 to 3 months.
Right. Yeah.
And it's usually I go out, because usually I'm like, I've been doing the same thing for a while. I just need to go out and reset and go out into nature and just kind of like decompress. And I kind of know what to expect now.
Yeah.
Like I remember my first trip quite vividly, actually, and it changed my life. I know that's
whatever it does, man. I'm going to check my camera here.
Absolutely. Not like I would say as profoundly as some people say, but it certainly changed my outlook on some things, and how I see the world and how I see myself. And it's probably it opened a door that has led to more discovery and kind of a better understanding of myself and all that type of thing. And that is, I feel that's something you're doing almost like a self-improvement thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And it is a mental health thing as well. But that's, to me, not recreational. I smoke weed recreationally because I like to relax. I used to hang with my friends. It makes watching movies more enjoyable. It makes food taste better. Like sure. I can't say anything about that with mushrooms. They taste bad. Yeah. They makes your stomach like dodgy.
Yeah. If you're around people that aren't on them, you feel weird.
Oh man, I can't do mushrooms if I'm not with other people on mushrooms. Even if I know they're around, I'm like they can hear me,
dude.
I get paranoid, dude. Yeah. Like I'm like, even in like
I wonder about these things too. I mean, we can get off the drug topic here in a second, but I feel like I'm curious about anybody who's a proponent or tries to promote these things and wants them to become. They've done the drug. I think it's probably pretty well known or pretty well understood that I think anybody who doesn't, if anybody like appreciates the effects and what they can have on you as like psychologically and emotionally and stuff like that. If you, I don't think anybody who's done them wants them to not be legal. Like I would bet even people who are like coke heads who were in like rehab wouldn't say this drug shouldn't be legal. This is just a speculation of mine, but I don't feel like anybody who's done the drug would go, this should not be legal, whether it's mushrooms, whatever it is, right? I think anybody who hasn't done it, I don't know how you get to say it shouldn't be. If you haven't done any research on it, you shouldn't be able to say it shouldn't be on the market. And I guess I agree with limitations and certain things for sure. But it is weird that, like, I wonder how many cops fucking do drugs and just enforce it all day. And people who are like doing this stuff and like, it's obviously corrupt cops and stuff, but people who are like, I don't see anybody who's even like a past addict. Like, I don't think anybody who was an alcoholic would say we should bring back prohibition. Which is like, alcohol's the worst thing for you pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly not good for you. There's actually no physical benefits to it. Like you could argue that it creates positive social environments, but they could also argue it creates negative social environments.
Yeah.
But I think I agree to your point. It's like, I think, and that's why I think education is so important, and actually that it's being researched.
Yeah.
Like cannabis it's still federally legal in states. They're still not allowed to do federally funded research on it. Right. So, and I think they're starting to do it on psilocybin and things like that in the States. Certainly in Canada, I think it's happening.
Yeah.
Like actual studies.
Yeah.
But I mean, which I find it's ironic. It's so far ironic that I think there's like thousands of years of like cultural use.
Yeah.
And like good knowledge and useful information.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, but our scientists need to like dissect it in a lab and come up with some test results, and then we need to do a clinical study on this amount of people before we can say it's safe. And it's like, I understand both are right. I'm not saying one's better or wrong. Right. One's right or wrong. We absolutely we need both. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
We can't just accept that all the cultures previously were correct in every single way.
Sure.
Because we've changed. Like the humans, our society's different, our bodies are different, our chemistry is different. We've evolved, so we need to make sure that if we're going to be saying that something is safe for human consumption, what does that mean?
Yeah, right. I just think like I don't even know. I think it's funny that the cannabis scene in the US, you have to make a drug a certain class, like bring it to, it's got to be, you got to change its like designation in the legal system, I guess, right? Be able to people to work on it and stuff, or be able to do scientific research on it. But then I think when you look at like a doctor who's studying cannabis and studying these drugs, they're not like your typical doctor. They have a bit of a longer hair. They don't button up the shirt all the way, so they kind of look like they're a bit of a like pothead. So like I think it may be that there's that image of the old pothead style. If you think about like as a pothead, he's like a burnout. But I think in the people who are doctors of cannabis and who are doctors of medicine like that, they have a little bit less edge to them. So maybe it's hard to trust. Maybe the lawmakers are having a hard time trusting these doctors. This is probably, maybe I'm going to get called out for this, but they kind of look like they're potheads.
I mean, maybe
you know what I mean? Like,
sometimes, but I mean, I think like the federally funded studies are going to be pretty
white lab coat
diverse
for sure.
now.
Yeah, I guess
like,
right.
I know what you mean though.
But you have guys like Paul Stamets who are like pushing for the legalization of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you have an agenda behind it, then I don't really think you can do like fair assessments of the studies.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
It should be done by a non-biased like. Whatever, like
well, pharmaceutical companies shouldn't be the ones doing the research on it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole conversation there for you.
Yeah,
but,
for sure. But yeah, man. Yeah, so we can move on from that because I don't have a lot of information on that. I don't want to just eat my own words, but
yeah, no, fair enough. It's fascinating. I'm excited to be part of the cannabis industry. Yeah. I think the psilocybin industry is going to have its own unique and interesting challenges, but overall, I feel that both cannabis legalization and psilocybin legalization will be a net benefit.
I think that could change our society, the psilocybin one for sure. I think it could change it in a better way. If people are like, I mean, it's going to be done through a bit of greed and stuff for sure to get it out here, but I think it could help change us in the society. Mm-hmm. Are you into like, do you get into like conspiracy theories, that kind of stuff? Do you get into like... A
little bit, like... I guess I take everything with a pinch of salt these days. Like, don't believe anything you read on the internet.
Yeah,
but there's too many questions and kind of too many coincidences a lot of the time. I'm just by nature quite a cynical person.
Do you think aliens are real?
I think there are aliens in the universe for sure.
Right. Maybe not in the form that we all think they're in, but something like.
Yeah, I don't think we'll. It's unlikely. I mean, if you look at the statistics, that it's unlikely that we're going to run into them in our life. I don't.
Yeah, no, just wanted to ask. Yeah, for sure. I'm not looking to get deep.
I definitely am not written off. Whether they're here now, wandering around.
Right. That'd be weird, right?
I would say it's probably low probability, but I'm not going to write it off for sure.
I wonder, like, even like a simulation where everyone thinks like we could be like in a simulation and stuff. Have you been spending much time with like looking into AI and ChatGPT and stuff?
A little bit, yeah.
I haven't done much of it, but I feel like I was thinking about ways to make it work for you, and like, man, I could just say, hey, like ChatGPT, like here's like somehow give it like, you know, half a Bitcoin and go, here, make me $1 million.
Yeah.
See if you could do that, right?
Yeah.
Because who says it can't do it, right? Because he'll tell you how to invest and where to go, right? And if it's pulling from like millions of data sources, or it's like the photo stuff, maybe this is probably more directed to you, I guess. Photos and like realism and stuff. That engine, what's it called? The Real Engine 5 or whatever it is, or Real, what's it called?
Yeah, I've forgotten the name of it, but I know the one you mean. There's like a really successful one. There's one
it was
like image
4,
one.
now it's 5.
Yeah, and I watched, and it's annoying, I can't remember the name of it, but I watched a video of like the difference between version 1 and version 5 now.
That's insane, right?
And it really is, it's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, like anytime there's this new technology, like especially people in that field, like have that, you know, that fear, like, oh, am I going to lose my job? And like, I've had this conversation with quite a few creatives, and it's warranted, but I can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? I can learn it. I can it's certainly not going to go away. So rejecting it's a stupid, short-sighted idea.
Yeah.
So I think it's about really, and then it's about, I think it's a larger topic about understanding oneself and humanity. Like we're building, I say we, the royal we, the technologists are building software that will essentially try to figure out like what it means to be human, like what humanity is. Yeah, and it really does. I love this type of stuff, man, because like that's like more than conspiracy theories. I love learning about how the universe works, how consciousness works, like how that kind of ties together. And AI is part of that kind of technology now, where it's an avenue of discovery. Because we can create AIs that can start to understand themselves, and if they can replicate and become more and more intelligent, like it's a some people say it's a slippery slope, and you've suddenly got this, you know, AI computer that will essentially run. Or I heard, what was it on the podcast you were watching earlier? I think they even say it's going to become a digital god.
Yeah, well, because it creates itself while it's like it's. The human characteristics are it's creating itself while it's improving itself, while it's learning about itself, and it has like the capability to be introspective more than we do almost as a human in a way that's like, and that might sound weird, but it's like it has a way to analyze itself more than we do, and how to figure out how to like solve that, whatever that is inside. It has a way to build and analyze. Analyzation, is that a word? Analyzation?
Could be.
Whatever it is now. It has a way to build on itself. Whereas we do, but it's more like spiritual for us. We have to like kind of like think about where we're bad and how does it work for us. But as a AI has like a thing where it can be like, it knows where it's at, who it is, and what it's doing, and how to fix it. And as it does that more and more, that AI god, or like an electric god, is crazy to think about.
I think one of the challenges, and this is just from what I've heard on podcasts and things like that, I'm not a technologist or anything like that.
I'm just making shit up as I go. Yeah, for sure.
That it's one of the big challenges is it's not embodied in anything.
Right. Okay,
way we interpret the world, our brain it's not like this is a coffee cup. It's like this diameter, it's this height, it's made out of this material. Like we don't think that. We think it's a coffee cup, it's got coffee and it's for drinking. It's an object. My body interacts with it without thinking. Like we use things to solve problems that we need the solutions to. So if I'm need caffeine or I'm thirsty, like I'm going to pick it up, don't even think about it.
Right.
Like when you train a machine or program a machine to do that, there's no like situational feedback for them to gain context of what's going on. Like it's a program rather than kind of something that is getting that feedback from the world. It's like a one-way thing, maybe.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the feedback comes mechanically from us. Like for the most part, we operate how it reacts until we type in what we want to ask it. Now it knows it, and then it builds on that. If our brain had to think about the circumference, what's in every time we thought about it, we would move so slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Because so, I think as a human, our brains have been like, you don't need to think about what this is all about. You need to know you want that drink and you drink it, right?
It's a shortcut.
Yeah. So we've created shortcuts. We probably never had. There was probably never a long cut for us in the beginning anyway. It's just always been shortcuts. But I think, with AI, it's like it needs to do the math or do the, for now anyway, of like what it all means. And maybe when it gets to a point, maybe when it gets to these shortcuts, that's when we could see like a more related to humanoid type actions and thoughts once it's past like all the calculation point of it all.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that there probably was a long cut, which was evolution.
Right.
Like, I think we've probably evolved to pick things up that like, or find useful objects based on just iteration after iteration. So the caveman picked up a stone, and then we tried to break another stone, and then it was like, well, the sharper stone is going to be better for doing something like one thing or rather than the next.
Yeah, right.
And that's just pure iteration.
Yeah.
So, and that's what AI is, as far as I understand, AI does. It's just iterating.
It's just fast at it, but it can't do any physical. I mean, it can do. I guess when they build robots like Boston Dynamics, they have those like. They try to knock over the robots. They have the robot, like, see the one they have them in a firing range and they're bumping it as it's shooting, and it's like it can crack itself and shoot.
Yeah.
Dude.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But that's like a rope. So I guess like that would be a rope. If you were to like say, let's say, well, every house has a robot type of thing.
Yeah.
Does that have AI?
Right.
Probably not. That would probably be linked to a central hub. So there'd be like a big data center that is the brain. And then it would feed out probably a bit more like iRobot.
Yeah, like the vacuum.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
Like
iRobot. I haven't seen that. Who's in iRobot?
It's like Will Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that guy?
He got slapped in the face. Or he slapped the guy in the face.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Eh? Did you see that? Have you watched the Chris Rock thing? Did you watch his stand up?
I watched like 5 minutes and
it wasn't very good.
It turned me off. Like he's just
I watched and then I just fast forward to see what he said about Will Smith, and I mean, he burned him for like 10 minutes. I don't really care. I'm like, it's all just bullshit anyway. It's like, bro, still watching movies. He'll be at movies again, but yeah. I don't think I've seen iRobot.
It's good. Like it's
old, right? It's like it was out a while ago, right?
Yeah, it's an older movie.
Have you seen Ex Machina?
No, I haven't.
That's awesome.
I'll check it
That's
out.
really cool.
I've had mixed reviews, but if you're saying it's good,
yeah, it's really good. I've watched that a few times. It's great. But yeah, I don't know I've never actually sat and talked to somebody about like AI and like in a setting where like I've never actually had anybody sit down and chat about it more than like what I've heard on podcasts. I've never actually asked a friend about what they think about it.
Well, there's plenty to discuss. I mean, we can go back to the photo stuff. Like okay, so I saw some amazing portraits the other day from. It was like it was images of like the Cuban crisis, like when people were trying to flee Cuba.
Yeah.
And like this work, it's just like if you didn't tell me it was AI, I would have been like, this is.
You wouldn't have known.
I wouldn't have known, but I'm like, this is such incredible work. I'm like,
yeah.
But in your brain, you're like, it's just lit too well. Yeah. It's just lit too cinematically. You're like, it's like it's not a problem in the technical sense. It's a situational sense. It's just like I just know that. Back in the day, there's not cameras that could have done that.
But that's because right?
Because
like the average person could be like, that's beautiful. Like it's crazy because like
the comment section was brutal. the guy in the first line was like, "These are AI generated. These are not photographs." And his whole thing was like, "I'm doing this as a test to see."
Yeah, and people don't even read that.
No, people were fucking irate. They're like, how dare you use these people's struggle to like these fiction. Well, obviously there were people real, but like it wasn't like, hey, this person's name and this person's place. Like you're not leveraging their pain, you're leveraging the pain of that whole crisis. And people did not like that at all. There was maybe 80% of it was negative, 20% was positive.
Right.
And I think that's mainly just a fear thing. And because people just don't know what
fear of the
to
unknown,
think.
right?
Yeah, don't know what to think, don't know what to feel. Yeah. And I totally agree. I thought I'm inside. I'm torn. I'm like, well, yeah, it's not photography, but you know, if you had asked someone in the analog age, like when you showed them a digital photograph and let's say you manipulated it in Photoshop, they'd be like, that's not a photograph. So like what a photograph is changing.
Right. Yeah, I guess. And it's not even like fix it in post or like put it in Photoshop and change it. It's like happening. It comes out that way. It's immediate, right?
And I was thinking about this earlier because a lot of the middle class is like we're in a service-based industry.
Sure.
We create stuff for other people in the commercial world a lot of the time.
Right.
And once, I mean, like the visual stuff, is just the start. And like obviously we've got ChatGPT, which is like text and things like that.
Yeah.
And, putting aside, let's say like how good it's going to get or whatever, let's just assume it's going to get to the point where it's as good or better than humans.
Sure.
Just for argument's sake, then it's going to affect a lot of people's livelihoods.
Mm-hmm.
And this may sound controversial, but like when it's like some segments of society, like let's say if you're a trucker or a driver or things like that, then people generally don't seem to care as much.
They're like, sure. Yeah, I agree.
They're like, oh, screw those guys. We can have automated trucks.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my Amazon packages faster. I'm going to do this. Like it's just that we kind of seem to feel that because they're lower skilled jobs, then they're more okay for them to be replaced.
Sure. Or just ignored.
Wait until it's like a vast swath of the population.
Sure. Yeah.
That's like, oh, I went to university 5 years ago and now my job's obsolete.
Even I followed this lawyer on Twitter and he's like showing how you can just get legal advice through ChatGPT now, and it's like it's as good as anything he would say. He's like I experimented. He showed this long Twitter thread about what he was like. I don't remember the whole context, but he's basically saying he put the scenario out and he's getting going. He's like, so I can just ask ChatGPT, and however I prompt it is what makes it more accurate, right? So I ask it one question, I don't get what I want, so I ask another question. He's like, you don't have to come to me for certain things now. You can just type it in there. If you prompt it correctly, you can ask it for these certain things and advice or direction or whatever it is. And he's like, so he's just somewhere like beware of the future.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, fuck. I'm like, even that kind of stuff. I mean, they can make film stuff now, like the Real Engine. That's what it is, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So even that stuff is like, I don't think, I mean, whether it's in 2 years, 1 year, or 10 years, I mean, even just like when we talk about truckers, like people have to get the goods off the truck, put in the warehouse, everything else, right? I mean, that'd be a long time before that's totally automated, but not that long. So
I don't think it's that long at all.
No, and then like
I think in fact it probably already happens at Amazon warehouses.
Sure, yeah, and there's a Volkswagen manufacturer factory that does like the floor is all magnetized, and these like carts go by and they work on like bouncing the way the magnets bounce them around and direct them and stuff.
Cool.
And it goes and works on cars. So the cars stay on one spot, and the machines go around and they get triggered once whatever this machine's done. It gets triggered and moves with it.
That's dope.
I mean, it is dope, but I mean, there's like probably 4 guys in the factory just looking at the machines and looking at their scheduling and stuff and just seeing what's up. Yeah.
So it opens up a really fascinating question, I think, for the humanity question. It's like, well, okay, like it brings up the question of like, why do people work? Because I think a lot of people work to live, so we need a paycheck, right?
Yeah, that's UBI at that point.
Yeah, it's most of the people in the world, I'd say. There's a lot, obviously there is a subset of people which just, they don't need the money, they work for fun or whatever, but like I'd say, go as far as say that most of the people working to get money so they can pay their mortgage, their rent, their car payments or whatever.
Right.
So when it gets to the point of like critical mass, when AI is doing or providing the value that these jobs currently provide, then what's going to happen? And I think that is a little bit more scary than AI taking over the world per se.
Sure.
Because it just means we're going to be a lot of redundant people in a lot of debt that the government not going to be able to do anything about it because they can't just create new jobs and new value. Like value has to come from providing something other people can't.
Yeah, and if you don't make it, if the society doesn't have jobs anymore, well, how you don't pay taxes. You're just going to tax companies that make stuff. You have to tax a company, and who owns the company? Does an AI own the company? Does a human own the company, right? And just like you have to tax somebody to make the roads work and everything else, and get these like infrastructure going. So then if people don't work, and if you have universal basic income, then you have just drones like just zombies walking around with nothing to do. And maybe people get creative and do stuff, but creativity will be pretty much like automated by then as well too. So you have this like colliding of like progress that's in the end, I don't even know. I mean, I see it as, I mean, there's no exchange of wealth back and forth, which needs to happen to some degree, right? Whether I pay you $5 for that, you give me $5 for this, that's what you're talking about. If that stops, or if we just can't do anything, if I don't have, then it's just like fucking like food stamps and checks from the government, which, where's that money coming from? It's so fucking weird.
Well, yeah, and if you continue down that road, what you're going to end up is in a dystopia where you have a collection of conglomerations that own everything, and essentially dictate to us what what food you eat, what cars you drive, like all that type of thing.
The Fifth Element, that movie, you know, where you like,
that's one of my favorite movies now.
Okay,
Although
awesome.
I would say The Fifth Element, actually, like, it looks like people have a good amount of personal freedom and choice, whereas I actually don't think that's like, we say we live in a free economy, freedom. It's like, we actually, like, if you look closely, things are actually becoming more and more.
I think once cash goes away, you're going to see this crazy amount of thing where we don't have, I mean, you're looking now, like, where Vail doesn't allow, they don't do cash. So if you work at a bar, all your money's now tracked by the government. You have to, you get paid. You get tips, don't come into you on a regular basis. You have to, your tips can come on a credit card, which is all tracked. You can have, I mean, you could maybe have like garage sales and stuff. Then you're doing Interact transfers. Everything's tracked. And then so, it's already there.
I'm less worried about the government. Like everyone's like, oh, the government this, the government that. I'm like, the government is too bureaucratic and short-sighted to be effective at manipulating people's behavior to their benefit. Like, they're reacting to everything more or less, and like, give them credit where credit is due. They do some things well, they do some things not so well, and they do some things terribly. They're a human expression of governance, which is just another word for control, essentially.
But
I think luckily we voted. Like, luckily it's luckily for now it's a democratic system. In the future, let's say, like, going down this hypothesis where corporations essentially dictate through AI, kind of like, not dictate, but no one will ever dictate. It'll give you the illusion of choice, and then it'll be between this one and this one. But I'm a big South Park fan, like the douche and the turd sandwich. I'm like, it's just two sides of the same shitty coin, and you're given this kind of illusion of choice, which I think would just, people will get, corporations and marketing or whatever AIs will just get a lot better at convincing people that they are actually making their own choices, and things are potentially becoming freer, where in fact it's like more oppressive. I
think we have things like social credit scores and stuff, like all that stuff that's like looming at some point. I don't know a lot about it. I don't know about AI, but I am interested in what happens, and even the next like 6 months or even a year with AI. Even just like ChatGPT and what people do. Like, there's that Drake and I don't know who he's with, a song that got created by AI. It's a banger, and it's on. They're trying to get people to take it down off of Spotify. Can't remember what it's called. I saw it on Twitter the other day, and it's like, it's a pretty good song, but it was made. It's a video. You can tell the video's kind of shit, but it's a song that was made completely from AI, making a song. It's Drake's voice, and I can't remember who else is in it. I think maybe The Weeknd. I think it's The Weeknd. Drake and The Weeknd.
Oh, I think I actually heard about this.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean, I'm not a big fan of either of that music, but it's good. It's
yeah. Oh, I don't know what to say, man. Like, it is. Yeah. It's scary, but like, I mean.
It's something we got to deal with. We have to keep moving on and do your thing. And like, I mean, if you worry about it, you can be frozen. You can be paralyzed in fear, right?
Yeah, like one thing I've learned in my short career thus far is that you need to adapt. And you can't. And one thing I think, as you get older, you become less adaptable per se.
I agree.
So I feel as a skill, it's something one could continue to invest in. And that to me is just keeping an open mind and it's staying healthy. I know this sounds like a silly thing, but like, I've started taking my health really seriously, not really seriously, but more seriously over the last 2 years. And that's had incredible consequences for my attitude and my productivity and things like that, and just my mental resilience. Because when these things happen, look, let's assume, for instance, that photography per se, or video, or content creation, marketing is all on the decline over the next 5 to 10 years. And let's hypothetically say in 10 years time, marketing is all done by AI and content, which is probably not.
Not even hypothetical.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's happening already.
Yeah. Right.
So, well, I suddenly don't have a career anymore.
Right.
And that's kind of concerning. But what do? Well, am I going to go back to substance abuse? Am I going to go back to drinking? And am I going to make it worse for myself?
Yeah, right.
I'm like, no, the only things you can do is try to reskill and look forward.
Right.
To me, I was saying saying this to my friend the other night. I was like, I'm fascinated by consciousness. I'm fascinated by psychology. Sure. I'm fascinated about how people think. I just never really thought I was smart enough or had the academic opportunities to like maybe pursue that with any specific rigor. And
it's going to be a pretty big thing, I think, with like even like BetterHelp and those things online. People are looking towards like that's something you can't AI.
I would hope so. My friend immediately had a rebuttal though. He was like, yeah, but I have a friend who's doing counseling with on a computer now, or like typing stuff out. And I'm like, well, I guess like maybe that's not for everyone. Like I like to talk to people in person.
I'm wrong then.
Could you imagine like going into like a therapy like session and you're talking to an AI robot?
That'd be so weird.
Some people might be like, oh, because I don't actually have to talk to a human. Like I don't have to feel as vulnerable or whatever. But like, I don't know, man. Like, call me old fashioned, but I like to have
doing this
heart to heart.
Yeah.
You know, like so people, you know, like everyone's different. Everyone's human experience is like so uniquely theirs. And like I approach every person that I can it's the sense that I can learn something from them. They have something a piece of information or an insight that I don't know that I can learn something from. Yeah. And the way that manifests during a conversation like this, like, yeah, you could probably write that. I could maybe in the future have this conversation with an AI, but like, would you want to?
I think when you mentioned like that photograph that you could tell the lighting wasn't the right way back then. If you said that guy that made from the Cuban photo, they were like, I think as humans, it'll take a long time for us to not be able to see that. And if I'm talking to you, if I was talking to you and you were like a robot or AI, and even if you're really realistic, I think there'd be a long time before we can't tell.
And I hope so.
Yeah, but I think, and that's like where that's where we can hang on is like human interaction can keep. It's like, are really like, it's like societies who have more friends and who are more communal, they live longer and stuff, right? So, I mean, imagine if that's something like that's if you can keep that alive, I think it's some kind of fight against it, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's spiritually, you need to have people around you because you can I think loneliness kills people.
Yeah. We're in a fascinating time because we're fully in a sectarian like environment now. Right. Like the religion really doesn't have in the Western world, I'm talking about mainly here, religion seems to be old news for a lot of people.
Right.
And we're kind of in this godless environment now where we're wandering in the dark.
Right.
And we're using, first it was like consumerism. So like we buy brands, we buy things to kind of like make us feel better. Like, and we still do it. Like everyone does it. Like and even as a marketer, I do it, and I know I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I spending twice the amount of money on this brand just to have the brand name?
Yeah.
And it's like, because I want to be seen in this social.
Because it still counts.
Because and like, look, you can argue against that. I have a friend who will never buy brands, and he has more money than any of us.
Right. Yeah.
So, but it's how we figure ourselves into the social structure. So. That's our new sort of Bible. It's the new religion is, well, not even new, like it's consumerism.
Right.
I'm almost thinking we're getting to this, or at least entering maybe this post-consumerist environment where that it's instead of we're starting to realize that things are things, and the intrinsic value we place on them probably isn't as important as we think, and we're coming into this, at least some people coming into this age where it's becoming less important, and we're realizing without a connection to nature and each other, we're actually worse off. And that is something I feel that's happened to our generation in the last probably 10 years. Like when growing up, like in the 80s and 90s, it was very consumerist. It was the height of marketing and advertising.
Definitely the ignorant consumerism too, where you didn't know that it was all bullshit and you were getting stuff from like like we know our stuff comes from China. We didn't know it back then, and we thought it was all we could just kind of ignore it and look away.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of that stuff you're saying about that, I think there's like an economical status that is where you are, like financially in your life, definitely impacts how you feel about consumerism. You know, like if you're just trying to survive and just pay your bills each month and do things, consumerism, I feel like, this might be wrong, but I feel like it's harder to adjust to, it's hard to focus on yourself when you're trying to like when you're financially set and you're good, you can kind of focus on yourself and kind of do things. If you're not, you're still trying to get that piece of bread for the next day and everything else, right? So I think it makes you, not your own fault, but just harder to make yourself aware of like what your actually impact is. Maybe that sounds crazy, but
no, like I think if you have less economic freedom, you're less likely to reflect on the importance of decisions you're making.
Sure, yeah, because
like
your decisions are just day to day, and you have to make certain
survival.
Ones. Yeah,
right.
Survival
versus thriving. Like,
yeah, right.
So once you're in a situation where you start to have disposable income and you start to make you have more decision making power. That's where the marketers and the businesses want you, because you know then it's not just option A because it's the cheapest one. It's option B, C, D, E, F, G.
Right.
And they're all slightly different variations of the same thing.
Right.
And that's when the power of brands come in. I studied that brands at university, and that's like partially why like I'm fascinated by psychology about it.
Right.
And why I'm also like I hate it. Like I hate it, man.
I do
like,
too. That's why I don't do it anymore. That's kind of like I left. I stopped marketing. I mean, at least in TV, everyone knows you're lying. When you're making a movie or TV, they all know it's kind of fake, right? I didn't leave the marketing industry on my own volition. I kind of, like I said, I worked in, I did it once and I got brought back in with a cannabis company. And then that burned me out, maybe like full PTSD on emails and stuff. It was crazy. And I feel like I don't accept anybody's marketing anymore. Like I don't feel like you're trying to convince someone to do something. If it's buy a jacket for $1,000 that you've made somewhere else, and you have to tell someone you still have a environmental policy and you're trying to save the world with your jackets you're making or whatever, but you're not changing where you're making them from, whatever else, right? So I'm not making any specific comment, but like that kind of stuff to me, I'm like, look, if I'm going to get the jacket, I'm going to do my own research and find it, but I think there's very few tactics out there that we can use anymore that are different than we'd used 5 years ago. I think everything's pretty homogenized now as far as like branding. There's personalities that can help you with your brand, but then I think it's just kind of bland. And even if something's blown up and crazy, it's because they've either been controversial or they're about to get canceled, or they made a big mistake, which everyone's calling them on now, which I don't think anybody has a right to call anybody any mistakes because we're all doing dumb shit on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, the whole marketing and brand thing, I mean, I still have, I think of brands more of like quality, not like their image. I don't care about their image anymore. I just care if they make something good I'm going to be able to use for a long time. Yeah,
perception versus the actual like functional value.
Yeah, I think the functional value is bigger. And I mean, that's what, maybe something like Patagonia trying to make that, but like this whole like we'll sew your sleeve on for you or fix your stuff, like yeah, it's all good, but ultimately they still need consumerism to be able to do that for you, right? So I think the images to me have long gone, and I think it's more just like if whatever brand it is, they make good shoes, they make a good car, whatever it is, I don't know, but like I'd rather that than, and usually at times the good brands make the good stuff, but I'm definitely not concerned with the brand image anymore, what that brand does or what they try to do.
Yeah, I try and like help my clients see that being product-led, brand supported is a good way to go. So like focus your money and your effort on creating the best product you can. Yeah. If you can't and you go into the market and you fail, then your product just wasn't good enough. Like it's a free market economy, but don't like, and this is what people will try and do is they try and go in with like a mids product that's just blur because they probably made it from components that are already available and just threw it together in a new way and then added in this like really well designed, meaningful, quote unquote, authentic, quote unquote, brand that just tries to spin a perception.
Yeah, and that works for
damn right it works because it absolutely works, man. Good branding makes food taste better, cars drive better, clothes fit better, weed smoke better, 110%. Yeah, like I can't argue against the psychology of it, but I'm disillusioned and I'm like a bit. I'm like you, man. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just don't care.
Yeah.
Like I want something to work, and that's why like I'm careful what I say. 'Cause I'm in the marketing world
Sure,
still,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
like
for sure.
I care about my clients. I care about doing good work, and I'm
That makes you a valuable asset because you understand there's people who do still care, and you need to have like a story. You have to have the people attached to your brand and your ethos and what you do and stuff. But I think it can't just be one or the other anymore. It used to be you have good, like you said, you could have good marketing and have a great product, but now it's got to be both.
mm-hmm.
And that way, people you don't care if somebody doesn't care about your brand because you make good stuff. You don't care if they don't care about your product because you have a good brand.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you've got to do both really well so that people can choose what they attach to your brand with,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like the ethos and the branding or the product itself.
Yeah,
If you don't do both well, you'll lose at some point.
100%.
Yeah,
One way or another.
yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to chat about? It's been like an hour and a half. I just kind of start talking, so I don't know if you had something you were hoping to talk about or like. I just kind of
that's cool, man. Yeah, we've covered sort of like
kind of jump around a bunch.
Well, a lot of it interlinked, like the photography aspect, sort
Yeah.
of cannabis marketing, sort of consciousness and psychedelics, things like that. I think they're interesting topics. The conspiracy theory stuff it's fascinating. Like
I'm not really into them. I just feel like I ask because I think it's like funny. Like I have friends who are, I don't know if conspiracy theorists, but like you just I don't know you very well, so I always ask. We try to keep the conversation pretty casual. But do you have anything products coming up you're working on? Anything you need to like promote or something?
What do I need to promote? So like, okay, look, my kind of goal, seeing where everything's going right now, what I'm seeing is this commoditization of creativity.
Right. Okay.
So, and AI is a part of that. So, like a good example is, I've got a client and their sales team gave us some feedback on the creatives we were doing, saying like, oh, when you're scrolling through Instagram, you've got beautiful photos, but we don't know what the strain is. Like, there's no text on the images, like on the actual images.
All right.
And I was like, okay, interesting. I was like, first, my emotional reaction was like, oh,
don't ruin
God,
the photo.
yeah, you're ruining the photo. But then I was like, wait a minute. I remember now, because Instagram is no longer an art platform or a social media platform.
Right.
It's a marketing platform.
That's true.
If anyone has any doubts about that anymore, it is a marketing platform.
Sure. Yeah, it is. Totally.
A sales platform now. So I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to fight it, obviously. Like I'm here to serve my client. And that was actually good feedback, because as a photographer, I get maybe more into the art than maybe I'm thinking more with that part of the brain than the marketing side.
Sure.
And actually, I went back and I looked at the stuff. I was like, yeah, that's fair enough. And then now I'm starting to design essentially ads on every, like, I'm being careful about it, but like each one is like, if you slide to the left, it's got a whole text, like text slide that explains and talks and educates.
Yeah.
So it's strategic, and there's still good photography. So it's that, it's a bit of both. But what I realized, I learned, I can't remember his name, but this I would call a successful artist came to town. He was had a gallery at one of the big hotels. I forget what it was. It was like a pop-up gallery. Mm-hmm. And this dude sells his prints for like 60 grand a piece.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like, he's in his 50s.
Sure.
Got a kid and he's traveled the world. Like, he's clearly a talented dude.
Yeah.
But I asked him, they were doing a Q&A session. I was like, do you still do commercial work? And he was like, only if I have to.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? He was like, because they tell me what to do. And he was like, I want to do what I want to do.
Right.
And he says, yeah, I'll take the 200 grand payday. That's how much he charges. Like, obviously it's a big production thing. It's not just the day. It's a lot that goes into it. But 200K for what could be one photograph or one creative piece is...
That's a lot.
I mean, that's there's only a handful of companies that will pay for that these days. Maybe more than a handful.
Not in the outdoor industry. High fashion.
Fuck that, no.
High fashion, photography, like even
Coca-Cola.
cars. Yeah, right.
And ultimately, like, that's where I see the cannabis going to. Like, I'm staying in the cannabis game so that... And I'm well positioned that so when everything is conglomerated, Anheuser-Busch's and the Miller Coors, like, I'm still working with those companies, like, of the cannabis world, hopefully.
Yeah.
But the other part of it I mentioned is, like, I decided this year that I just sharpening my artistic skills, because I've always struggled to call myself an artist, to be perfectly honest. I like to draw from a young age, but I never thought my work was any good, and I never really showed my art to anyone. And honestly, my drawing sucks. It does. I'm not saying I'm a good drawer at all.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, I think I had an innate creativity in me, and it only is just sort of manifest through photography in the last 7 or 8 years.
Right.
So a lot of the work I do in the commercial cannabis world, in the cannabis world, it's what we discussed slightly about earlier. It's like black backgrounds, product shots. Don't get me wrong, there's an artistic element to it.
Sure.
And I wrote a post about this a while back. I'm like, I don't think it's art. Like, I don't think commercial photography is art, as artistic as it is art, because the art should come from the heart of the artist.
Right.
And it's something that you want to say, and it's important to you.
Right.
So I'm starting to take a conscious effort to build that skill.
Okay.
Firstly, in the cannabis sector, with the creativity around sort of creating more interesting and better ads than anybody else, using like surrealism or different artistic methods, better, more creative shoots. You know, taking inspiration from the food industry, from the beverage industry, because that's ultimately where it's going to end up. And that's where it should end up.
It's like consumer packaged goods are where it's at. It's where it is right now. Anyway,
yeah.
So
And look, as much as we just talked about a minute how disillusioned with marketing is, like, there's the space, there is the opportunity to do good work, and I'm not going to write everything off, because I work with some amazing clients and good people who really do want to make a good, positive impact on the world. So I believe in that, and I want to be a part of those projects. But I'm also doing my own art pieces. I'm doing a 3-series piece that I'm actually halfway through shooting it right now. It's still cool. At my house. It's set up.
Nice.
It's like it's a black and gold series, cannabis still life series. That if I keep honing that skill and evolving that eye, then maybe one day I can sell prints for 60 grand.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Who knows? Like, I'm not going to write that off. It sounds crazy, but like, I'm assuming that other photographer didn't start out being like, I'm going to sell $60,000 prints in galleries.
Well, seeing somebody else do it gives you the idea that you can do it too, right? Like, you watch like other comedians, you watch podcasts, whatever, people that just do it, you can see it's possible. So why isn't it possible for you to do it?
Yeah, it's just a bit of faith and hard work.
Yeah, right.
But hard work beats talent every day of the week, I feel.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's just, it comes back, and this line between sort of art and commercialism I find is really fascinating. Like, I've had a couple of conversations recently about this, and there's a great documentary which I recommend anyone should watch if they're in the creative marketing advertising space. It's called Art and Copy. Okay. You can watch it for free on YouTube. It's a old PBS. It's dated because it's back from the golden era of advertising. Right. But it's the stories of these like old school, like OG advertising agencies, the old Saatchi and Saatchis, the DBAs, the DBWBDs or whatever, like all those old acronyms that we had no idea what stand for. But these were really smart, creative people who maybe didn't realize at the time what they were doing to the psyche of the Western population in terms of like the me generation. There's actually a woman in there who's like, they talk about inventing the me generation, which is the individualistic like part of our culture, which makes it actually easier for us to sell. If we're more collectivist, more family orientated, more community orientated, we wouldn't need products because
we buy less because we wouldn't think about it for ourselves.
Exactly. And that's like the West, and that's, you know, I can see why you're going around the world and people don't like that Western philosophy, is because it's pretty divisive. And I think we're seeing the accumulation of that now. And it's sad in a lot of ways, and it's depressing from a personal, not just but individualist perspective, because we're brainwashing is a bit of a harsh statement perhaps, but we've been indoctrinated a certain way of consuming, and I don't know the right word is, annoyed or kind of disappointed, or no, like, it's just somewhat sad that that's the situation we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah, I don't think we weren't aware of it happening. Most people,
and that's the thing.
So that's where when you're at a spot where you're like, the discovery of it, you're like, well, you didn't think nobody thought it was happening, because it was introduced as a new idea, or like a new like influence, not even an idea, but
unintended consequence.
Yeah, right. So you're like, now we realize, like, oh damn, so how do you reverse that? It's a hard reset's hard to do.
Well, I tell you what, I'm so grateful to live in somewhere like Whistler where I can walk out my house and be in nature in like a few minutes, because that's the main thing I feel that is the antidote. It is reconnecting with nature, and it sounds cliched, and that can just be as simple as going for a walk in the woods.
Well, it's like subconsciously knowing things are real.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like if you live in a city, things are real, but they weren't there before. They weren't like, they were created around you. I feel like when you go outside and you see a tree. Now, if you look at these trees, they were planted here before I moved here. But when you go to the mountains, and it's real. It wasn't put there to protect you or whatever. Or, I mean, it kind of was, I guess, but it wasn't put there to manipulate your environment. It was put there because that's where just because it's there.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's where like our nature can being in nature helps us, because it's just like it wasn't created not by our hand, you know. But if you're in a city, you can forget that stuff. I feel like people still litter and stuff. You don't think about it because when you live in a city, people pick up your garbage for you. I'm not saying that's like, I mean, maybe a robot will do it for us someday, but like
probably
happening now, I guess. But yeah, I think it's good. You got to, I mean, to get outside. I mean, even the Japanese talk about like tree gazing, and they have these like forests they walk into. I mean, there's one they kill themselves in too, but like, yeah, that the idea of getting outside and being in this place. They asked me when I was doing that 72-hour filmmaker showdown, they asked me what inspires you to be here in this valley and stuff, and I was like, I mean, the things that are outside. I mean, the mountains. Like, I mean, everyone says this answer when you live in this town because you know it, you appreciate it. If you ask somebody in the city what inspired you, it could be, you know, Andy Warhol inspired me, or it seems like different things. Like I'm inspired by the city lights and how bright New York becomes at night. It's not a bad thing. It's just a different way to be inspired, but it's a different way maybe you act as a human, as whether it's like consumerism, your environmental thoughts. Yeah, I don't know. I think we are lucky to live in this town for sure.
Well, I think
or a place like this anyway.
Like living in the city, for instance, like that contrast between like somewhere like this, for instance, where I think, yeah, there's like, to a degree, you don't choose what inspires you. Like your surroundings will somewhat dictate that to you because it's just what's available. Yeah. But I feel there's probably profound psychological differences between living in a city and living somewhere where you can actually have darkness at night.
Yeah, for sure.
Like use the example of that being a bright city. It's like that blue light. Like there's studies to show that like just that blue light or being exposed to light all the time does havoc on your sleep patterns and all these things.
Circadian rhythms, everything. Like yeah, right, sure. Like neural pathways and stuff. People say like people are like, oh, I love New York because it's like I can do whatever I want whenever I want, and it's always stimulation, right? Yeah, maybe that's not a bad thing for them. Who knows, right?
Yeah, I think everyone's unique, and everyone again will I guess evolve in their own little way. But it's fascinating to see like the rate at which we're changing, and I know that's again like said quite often, but like I'm fascinated by the impact of that and like how our behavior will affect our future generations. For instance, like there's a lot of change going on at the moment socially, like whether you agree or it's a whole nother kind of worms to open, but like it's an interesting time, and how we adapt and evolve and talk to each other about it. That's the thing. I think a skill which I see some people doing much better these days, and then some people just not at all. It's like having open conversations like this. This actually is happening more often now than ever before for me personally.
For sure, yeah, right.
I have more in-depth, complex conversations with people than I've ever done before.
That's good. I mean, it's like I have this because if I don't, I have very rare that I do that. So I do this and talk to people.
I think it's awesome. It's a great outlet for and not only like your own development, you're finding like understanding other people, but just, you know, strengthening community. Like I scrolled through all the people on your podcast and I was like, wow, I was like, I know a handful of these people.
Yeah,
right. Like, this is my community, and like I've lived here for 6, 7, 8 years now, and it's like, wow, actually maybe I do belong somewhere like this.
Yeah, man. I think like belonging isn't always about how long you've been somewhere, right? I mean, that's an old school notion that we had in this town, and I mean, sometimes it does. You can't come into town for a year and start bitching about everything you've done. I get it, but like, if you're on the same wavelengths as people you're here, like you moved here with the same dream and the same idea that everybody else came here with, so it means you belong here, right? It doesn't mean like, and if you're here for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, yeah, you can people can say, oh, I've been here for a long time. Then they can assume you belong here. But I mean, I have friends who don't go up the mountain, don't ski, don't snowboard. They live here and like, do they belong here? Well, yeah. It's like they don't need to do what everybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think these conversations are hard. People just don't have them. And I think you're talking about earlier, like how we're evolving. I think we're evolving into more extremes. Like people are like, there used to be, you know, as you learned about things, information traveled slower. So there was less, you know, turbulation in how we learned and what was happening in society. It was more like kind of even keel. Whatever was happening in the background was bad, you know, like there's government corruption, everything else. But like the society was less extreme, you know. And I think now we have so much access to information. We can be coerced into a group of, you know, people we think are the same and like-minded, and that's we can be tricked. But I think we have our society is changing fast, and it's the extremes are getting higher and lower.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like, and that's a huge problem because it's hard to get people to get on the same page when there's like, you know, when between poverty and racism and just like everything that changes, it's become more extreme and more like people jump on something because they want to belong. And I think that it does change. I don't know if it's good or bad, but sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, I guess.
Yeah, like part of it's like a identity crisis.
Yeah.
Like I talked earlier slightly about sort of the, you know, moving from religion into like the more secular, and then again kind of more into that, like some people more into that kind of spiritual uptaking, kind of that kind of general trajectory.
Yeah.
But how people see their identity and where they put themselves into the boxes around them is fascinating, because it's quite an interesting duality, whereas we want to be seen as being our own person and individualistic, but we also need to belong to other groups, and the acceptance of the acceptance of us by other groups sometimes feel like it should be default, like we should be allowed to join any group we want because we, you know, that's our privilege, where it's like, I don't really think that's the case. Like, I feel you need to, if you want to be part of a certain group or a subsect of people, like, yeah, like you can join it, but you have to kind of live that value.
You
like,
gotta
you
put
can't
in the
just
time and the effort. You gotta have the same beliefs for the most part.
Well, or at least just have an open mind to understand where they're coming from and understanding where their values and beliefs stem from.
Right.
I think you can hold two different beliefs in your mind and fluctuate between and learn and evolve, because I think that's a powerful way to understand new things and understand different people and different groups. But it's like how people see themselves in the world today, I think, is becoming more and more complex, and that is something I'm fascinated to learn more about, and kind of maybe even, I don't know, help people with in the future. Like that to me sounds like a really interesting way to learn more about myself, my place in the world, and how other people and helping other people kind of fit themselves into the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, people need to find a place to fit, I guess. And sometimes if you feel lost, it's where sometimes you lash out and you have like, if you feel like you don't fit anywhere, I mean, this might sound bleak, but you have like, you know, you have people who commit crimes and mass murder and stuff. They were exiled from their community. They don't have any place to fit in. They kind of feel like lost and lonely. And like, it's like, you know, we need to help people that are feeling like they've been shunned, or if shunned's not a great word, but they're kind of barriered out. And sometimes that's hard to do because it's up to them to do it too. But I think our society is creating these extremes of like, yeah, where do you fit in? It's hard to find that.
I'll tell you something that's maybe a little controversial, but like, I've thought about it. I haven't done it yet, but I genuinely considering it. I just need to like put it down on my calendar and do it. Is actually go back to church on a Sunday. Yeah, just walk into a 10 a.m. session, just to sit there. I just want to listen and just take in a vibe. I grew up Christian. Like I went to church growing up, and like, and then I went full reject on it. I was like, fuck this, fuck that. These fuckers did this, that, and the other. And then I realized I was like, got older, and like probably in the last 5 years or so, I was like, actually, there's a lot of powerful stories and a lot of meaning in there that I kind of probably just threw out because I didn't fully understand the context and like how other people manipulate it. I totally understand how mass religion's manipulative, and don't get me wrong, it's got a lot of bad points, but I just took all the bad points and was like, okay, that's all religions are all bad.
Right.
And like, now I'm taking a more kind of, I'm not jumping back into it, but I'm taking more of a kind of a, for lack of a better word, an academic approach. Like,
Sure.
I want to understand it,
Yeah.
to understand where those stories come from, how like a lot of the meaning in our modern culture it stems from that Judeo-Christian belief system. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I think part of moving forward would be looking back at why it was important in the first place. I don't think the dogma and all that kind of stuff I obviously don't like, but like I
think it was a thing
it's
to done. It was
stupid.
a guiding force to do right. Even though you look at Christian and religion, some stuff they've done really wrong. But I think it's like the guiding force to do right and to be a better person is like, to me, the biggest message in that, whether it's like you go to church or it's like believing in something that's good. So you have something to kind of operate by as like a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's all about like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Cause like if this having no God and no like higher power, not believing believing there's nothing beyond our lives and believing nothing's happening is kind of bleak. So to have something where you can think about, well, there is something better and I should be guided by something that makes me not be so cynical towards the world and just hope and have like a better outlook towards other people. I think that's probably a good way to go. I think going to church, that's something you need to do. It can help just, whether it's academic or you go to get right involved in it and jump around and cheer and stuff. There's like, I think there's some good to be taken from just that idea that there's like somebody that's watching over you, or not, but just something to like be like positive towards, if that makes sense.
You're subservient to some higher power,
Yeah,
and like it just means that you're not the one in control.
Yeah.
And like that's a mental thing too.
Right.
Like a lot of things, if you're an emotional like I'm quite an emotional person, like
Yeah.
you disconnecting, like being mindful of your emotions, how you're not your feelings, they're just feelings, they come, they go, they're there to protect you from various things. Like if you can separate your thinking self from your emotional self, and then next time, that's extremely powerful.
It's kind of like why yoga got so big. Like it's
Yeah.
a huge thing about that. Like there's like a baseline religion style to it. But I think that's probably what it is too, because people who didn't want to believe in, the religious side of it all, they could go to yoga and have this like, it's almost like a parallel thinking to religion, but it was like also physical. But maybe that's probably why it got popular too, I guess.
Yeah, and I would go as far to say like the spirituality movement is rooted in that that need for some sort of bigger meaning.
Yeah, sure.
And like,
so you don't feel lost and hopeless.
Yeah,
people can
like,
it's easy to feel that way.
And like that's again, like I mean, I love like on clear nights looking up at the stars and like just having that that total small feeling of insignificance on a small ball traveling 600 miles an hour, like kind of thing. And then it makes you think, well, Jesus, like what does that mean? And then you're like, this opens up this whole metaphysical thing, and then you're like, Jesus, like, but you have to make sense of that. You have to, at least in your mind, have an answer to move forward in a purposeful way.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be the right answer, but like that could be religion, that could be consumerism, that could be spirituality,
right.
Whatever the solution or an answer is. It's like, pick a starting point. And like nihilism, I dabbled with nihilism for a bit. Right. Didn't turn out great. A lot of drinking, a lot of substance abuse, and I was pretty miserable.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to dig myself out of that hole. And it's not like I'm like converted back to Christianity or anything like that. I'm just like, well, there's a space in the infinite. Like that's where that kind of like infinite and consciousness and all that type of thing start to, that unknown, that God, whatever you want to call that kind of like higher power, like that fascinates me from a psychological and philosophical point of view.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways as a human you can go. And I think even with like substance abuse and stuff, is AA and stuff, does it not have a religious base? Like it has some religious base to it,
I'm fairly sure, yeah.
I've never been to AA or whatever. What if is it AA? You go to AA even if you're a drug addict, right?
There's different ones.
Is there a
but
DA one?
I think so. There's different ones, yeah. But the 12-step program is.
It's got religion based in it, does it not?
Yeah, I think one of them is that you have to accept that you're not in control, power, and you have to like relinquish that control. But the thing is that and this is why it connects. It makes so much sense with religion and things like that, because the higher power you're being subservient to essentially is to help other people.
Yeah, right.
It's like don't be so selfish.
It's not the me culture.
Help
right.
other, like, and it's salvation through helping other people, and it's like it's so simple, and it's like, but that's really the antithesis of what we've been trained to do.
Right.
Like since birth, we've been trained, like in our Western culture, it's indoctrinated into individualism.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd find it hard pressed to find someone who would argue against the idea of community values and like looking out for each other and things like that. But
Yeah.
actually, if you look at pretty hard close at like consumerism, that's kind of the message.
Yeah.
It's like put yourself first.
Yeah.
You're the most important, and then everything else comes into place. Whereas it should really be the other way around. It should be
Right.
like my family's the most important, followed by my community, followed by the rest of the world, and I'm just a tool to help bring joy or goodness or lessen pain or whatever your thing is, whatever you can bring, whatever your value.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that everyone kind of knows inside. Like that's I probably didn't explain it very well, but I think there's this kind of feeling we all know that we have more to give. We have so much potential in us
Right.
that we don't know how to get it out in the best way because we're being, flooded with all these different messages. We have been indoctrinated in a certain way of thinking, a way of doing, a way of behaving. And yeah, there's little flashes of inspiration to kind of bring us out of it. I would say psilocybin's like a good kind of like,
sure.
just like, I think of like what's it called? Like when you like, I've lost my train of my words, but when you like kickstart a car or something, that's what like you jumpstart.
Yeah,
jumpstart. Yeah. It's like a little zap of it. Like, oh my God, like jolt me out of this daydream I've been walking through.
Right.
And then you can reassess that. That to me is like evidence to show that we're kind of asleep at the wheel in a lot of respects. And now I think we're all waking up somewhat together.
Yeah.
And trying to figure it out, which I feel is really exciting.
I think so too. I think the pressure of the world gets so strong. You need to reach it. People need to realize they're not on their own. When the pressures get so big, when they're not, there's no pressure. You can be on your own, not be worried about things. But when the pressure's around, you start to look around, and go, man, we have a lot going on in our world that's not great. And you start to realize you need other people. It probably slowly happens, but
we can end on this maybe.
Yeah, sure.
But I always try to write when I travel because I try to write in the mornings because I kind of have a fresher perspective. I'm just kind of more in that zone. Yeah. And like when I was younger, like I was tried to change the world. I was like, this sucks, global warming, consumer in that. And I was like, I traveled for a little bit and I was like, oh man, like the scale at which the world operates is just like, I was like, I can't remember the exact words, but it was like, I bitterly accepted that I couldn't change the world.
Right.
I could only change myself.
Yeah. Right.
And in doing so, it helps give other people permission to do the same.
Yeah.
So by setting the example of which I'm going to work on myself, I'm going to turn up the best way I can every day. I'm going to try and embody the values, the highest values I believe in, and live that out. That's the best way I can change the world. Because if you fight and you struggle and you fight the system and you're like you're never going to win. Not because you're not virtuous, but because it's a system. Right. It's you against the system. Whereas I took the mentality where it's like, forget about that. That's just going to stress you out. You're not actually going to make any meaningful change.
Right.
The meaningful change comes from changing yourself inside, living the values that you purport to say, and then change will come. And I tell you what, it has, and it will continue to come because of that attitude.
I agree, man. It's good. Cool. Yeah, I think I've done the same thing. It's easy to kind of just tick along and think everything's like, you think you can make big change, but it can be overwhelming. It can be like a daunting task, I guess. But if you start with small with yourself and work on things, you can see the light in life in a better light. Yeah. And you can realize where you fit in more and where you can kind of help, and more than just trying to it's like, take the biggest bite of your sandwich. You can't breathe and chew for a while. You got to move around. But if you take smaller bites and think about who you are as a person, how you can affect it, it's a lot easier on yourself for sure.
That'd be my one bit of advice for younger people who don't know what to do or are struggling is like, don't try to fix the whole problem at once.
Yeah.
Like figure out what you can do slightly better tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then do that. And then just keep getting slightly better every day, because that is compound interest. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like skip for, like I'm a living proof, man. Like anytime people told me when I was starting my career, being like, oh, like, you know, small steps, blah blah blah, or like you'll get there one day. It's like I never believed that shit, man. I was like, fuck, I can barely feed myself. How am I going to get this job? How am I going to do that? It's like, just, I'm not saying it's easy. Just like small little steps, like just believe. And it sounds so cliched, but believe in yourself, and just you're not perfect, and there's a million things you can do better. Like don't if anyone's like, oh, you're good the way you are, tell them to fuck off. It's like you can be so much better, but don't expect that to all happen overnight. Be humble and just work, just find out those little things, those little skills, and progress slightly better every day. As long as you're better than you were yesterday, you're already doing much better than most other people.
I think one thing is like the world doesn't really allow for patience, and you have to have that.
That's a very good way to put it. If you can cultivate that patience inside you, you're on your path to success.
Sweet. All right, cool, man.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan.
Good chat, buddy. Thanks for coming by. That was great. Good talk. Yeah, that was fun.